Good evening, all. Thank you all for joining us. I am Bob Schaefer. I'm a board member of Floridians for Democracy and the Floridians for Democracy Institute. On tonight's program, we're going to talk about what you can do to be absolutely sure that your vote will be counted, that your vote will be properly tabulated, that the results will be accurate, and that the elections will be, as they have been in the past, totally clean and pure in Florida, and that your impact as a voter will be exactly what the Constitution provides. The program tonight, we have two opening presenters, excellent people, and then after that, a panel. Our two opening speakers, first is going to be Michael McNulty. Michael is the policy director at the national organization Issue One. He leads Issue One's election protections efforts, drives money in politics reform, and oversees technology reform policy work. He brings more than 20 years of experience advising on election integrity and democratic reform initiatives in over 30 countries. Before joining Issue One, Michael served as a senior elections advisor in the U.S. Agency for International Development, where he spearheaded global democracy initiatives and shaped election-related programs around the world, and also worked at the National Democratic Institute, where he led election integrity programs to expand voter participation, administer elections effectively, and advocate for democratic reforms. The second kickoff speakers, and those of you who have been with us on previous programs know her well, is Amy Keith. Amy is the current executive director of Common Cause Florida. In previous roles at the organization, Amy helped defeat legislation that would make it easier for partisan actors to silence critics and damage the free press. She also co-led a nonpartisan coalition of over 40 organizations that successfully protected access to the ballot during the 2022 midterms. She testified in federal court as part of the lawsuit challenging Governor DeSantis' gerrymandered congressional map, and she previously worked leading election protections with the League of Women Voters. And after Michael and Amy have spoken, we're going to do a panel. I'll participate in that along with Lanelle Phillmon. Lanelle, immediately after graduating high school in Sneads, Florida, she enlisted in the Navy and served for 27 and a half years. After retiring as a command master chief, she volunteered for 18 months with local organizations that serve unsheltered persons while completing her MBA. And since 2012, she has worked with veterans and others experiencing homelessness in and around Jacksonville. She's currently the president of the League of Women Voters Jacksonville First Coast, the voter chair for League of Women Voters of Florida, former Northeast Florida ACLU board member, NAACP Jacksonville Chapter Armed Services and Veterans Affairs Committee member, and a Duval County election precinct manager. So we have folk with a tremendous amount of background and knowledge who will answer your questions. And once we've heard the speakers, the panel will take your questions and address any concerns you have. We're all on the same page that your vote will count, and we'll help you make sure that happens. So, Michael, let's hear it from the national perspective.
All right. Well, again, thanks so much for having me. This is such a great opportunity to speak to you all. It's really a true pleasure at this crucial time in our country's history. So, for those not familiar with Issue One, where I work, we're a cross-partisan organization that's based in Washington, D.C. We were actually founded over 10 years ago to bring Republicans, Democrats, and independents together to strengthen American democracy. We focus on practical bipartisan work to protect elections, to reduce polarization, to get big money out of politics, to hold tech platforms accountable for the damage they're doing to our democracy, and really overall just to make our democratic institutions more fair, trusted, and resilient. So before we dive into the Florida specific landscape with our next speakers who are much more expert in your state's situation, I'm just going to zoom out, provide a little bit of a national picture of our election process and what's happening right now, and kind of give you a framework for understanding the challenges that are facing our elections right now, but also some of the safeguards we have in place to ensure that these elections will hopefully go off as smoothly and as confidently and trusted as they have in the past. Um, And then I also want to just emphasize before I jump in, some of what I say, a lot of what I say will be a bit concerning and I think not unfamiliar to a lot of you, but just to emphasize, like, even though we're in a pretty dark situation and there's a lot of threats that we'll talk about, there's a lot of noise at the federal level and also in your own state, there's a lot of misinformation. The fact is that our country's elections, including Florida's elections, remain secure. And there have not been significant changes necessarily in how Florida is running elections. And you'll hear more about that from our next speakers. So voters should continue and can continue to vote as normal, serve as poll workers, trust election officials, just like we always have. All right, so now zooming out, I just want to take you through. There we go. Take you through a little disorienting slide here, but this kind of emphasizes my point that I worked abroad. Like we mentioned in the intro, I worked abroad on international elections for over 20 years. And I saw a lot of situations where, there's a Democratic backsliding situation, efforts to try to manipulate, interfere with, or otherwise tilt the playing field in elections. So I've seen a lot of playbooks to try to take over elections that maybe a president did or a ruling party did, to try to consolidate control over elections, entrench their power. And one key lesson is that Democratic backsliding doesn't really happen in one big, moment. It unfolds through a series of steps, and these steps are connected. So that's what I really want to emphasize today is like giving a broader pattern for drawing on what I've seen abroad and what we've seen abroad and learned from a broader pattern for understanding all of the different things you see on this slide that are just sort of overwhelmingly, negative challenges. This is all part of a what we call an election takeover playbook that is unfortunately being perpetrated by the executive branch right now, which, in the past, executive branches usually were supporting elections. Unfortunately, right now, in a lot of cases, it is acting as a sort of an interference and a weaponization factor to try to take over elections. So the good news is that there's a lot of strong Democratic guardrails. There's a lot of reason for optimism, and we'll talk about that at the end. But first, I just want to kind of talk you through a way to try to connect the dots and maybe have a view of how this all fits together, and in the threats that we're facing. So first, there's sort of five overall steps, I would say, to this sort of takeover playbook and this effort to try to tilt the playing field. The first one, and this is the most crucial one that we've seen a lot of, is to lay the groundwork by spreading false election narratives. And we've seen this from the president and his allies over the past decade plus, where essentially there's an effort to try to convince the public that the election cannot be trusted by spreading false information. And that is the point. The purpose is not necessarily to win court cases, to win audits. If it was, it would be the biggest failure that you could possibly imagine because we all know the court cases in 2020 were 0 for 60. We all know that courts over and over again have rebuked these false narratives of, widespread voter fraud or foreign interference or rampant non-citizen voting or rigged voting machines, you name it. It has been debunked and fought back by courts and also audits over and over again have proven these things to be false and debunked. So we saw a little bit of this last Thursday night in the primetime address by the president, rehashing some of the same tired, recycled false narratives. Again, the purpose is not to win in court, to win legal battles. It's to try, not well, but to try to convince enough Americans that the system is broken. And that is the point, to lay the groundwork for the next steps that we'll talk about. The step two is to install election denying loyalists in positions of power who can influence elections. And this is a key lesson from 2020 that the president took away, which is if you have actual serious people around you who will stand up to for the Constitution and stand against efforts to subvert elections, that is a good check on presidential power to do that. So this time, what the president has done is unfortunately installed individuals who have essentially publicly questioned or sought to overturn the 2020 results. And these people are now in key roles in the White House, in the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Justice, and other places that I would say attempt, not successfully, but attempt to use the federal government to interfere in elections and to do things that could potentially tilt the playing field. The The great thing is, we'll talk about later, that that actually in a lot of cases is unconstitutional, so it's been blocked by courts. Um, so that's the second step, is putting people around the president who are ready to carry out and try to weaponize the government, based on false narratives, instead of in the past where there were actually checks within the cabinet to stop these things from happening. The third step, again, is all based on these false narratives, right? This is all based on the false narratives. The third step is where we are now, and that's essentially trying to rewrite rules, policies, procedures, executive orders to try to tilt the playing field. And we saw that obviously, and you all have experienced it with the aggressive gerrymandering that was spurred by primarily the president, but then also the Democrats then bought into it as well. With us, it was an explicit strategy to lock in a structural House majority. We all know this. It was said multiple times. The Calais decision by the Supreme Court reignited the last minute gerrymandering in Alabama, Louisiana, South Carolina, Tennessee, and you all in Florida, I know, experienced it as well. And as a result, the GOP is likely to gain about 10 seats. But again, the Democrats also engaged in this. So both parties in the end ultimately have now created a much worse situation for voters in certain situations, that voters' voices are a bit more diluted than they were before. Again, there are checks in the future we'll talk about. The other things happening to rewrite the rules, controlling who can vote and how they vote. There are a lot of efforts that you've probably heard at the federal level, whether it's through executive orders, I'll note all of which have been blocked by courts, or proposals like the Save America Act that have, again, hit a wall in the Senate and will not be passed, that would impose strict documentation rules, centralized voter screening, new restrictions on mail voting, and other things. I know, again, you all have dealt with some of that in Florida, and you'll hear more from that. But again, none of this is being applied to Florida this election cycle, and I'm sure you'll hear that multiple times as well. The other parts of step three have involved pressuring the referees themselves, the heroes of democracy, the election officials that run our elections, that spend 4 years, well, 2 years and 4 years getting ready for these massive moments throughout an election cycle, are being demonized and attacked and called criminals, and lawsuits brought against them, and lawsuits, investigations, FBI raids. Like, these are the people we should be holding up as heroes. And unfortunately, they've dealt with a lot of these things I've just described, all again based on the step one, which is the false narratives. So that's where we are right now. Now, as we get closer to election day, there are already efforts to create fear and intimidation. Again, efforts. They're trying, but unsuccessfully, to create an intimidating environment by saying things about federal troops or ICE agents around polls, or other things that are unconstitutional and or illegal and would not stand up in a court of law. But even just by saying it, the attempt is to try to create an intimidating environment. But the good news is this is not working. People know that they can still go vote. Election officials across the country are understanding these risks, and they're actively preparing for these scenarios all across the country, including in Florida. And again, these moves would be illegal or unconstitutional. So they're not going to stand up in court if they attempt to do any of these efforts. But again, the plan is there, and clearly there's signaling that they might try something that we have to be ready that election officials and courts have to be ready to stop. And then ultimately, if all of this doesn't work, we saw in 2020, and we know again that there could be an effort to attack the counting certification process, to essentially, at the local level, challenge valid ballots, to try to delay tabulation, and then on up to the state level, where maybe there may be pressure from the executive branch on state certifying officials to not certify an election, whether it's a Secretary of State or a state board of election. Efforts maybe in the post-election environment to mobilize the FBI to seize ballots or materials like they've done in some of the pre-election, to declare a national emergency. There's a lot of scenarios that people are very clear on and understand and are preparing for, including Issue One and many other organizations. So these are serious threats, but again, they're all illegal, and everybody is preparing for them. So that's kind of where we stand in terms of the overall election takeover playbook. I think what I would say is that this is a lot of bad news, and I've talked a lot about, all the terrible things, but hopefully this gives you a framework for putting in place in your mind how it all fits together, and most importantly, why this election is so crucial and why it's so important to stand up and do the things that we'll talk about later. And then I just wanted to add a little bit more about why we have optimism, right? Yes, a lot of negative things I just said. There is a playbook. It's being used. It's kind of clumsy, but it's being used, and it's actually something we need to take seriously. But again, I worked internationally, and coming to the U.S. again and working on elections again gives me this renewed sort of respect for the U.S. election system because we have such key safeguards that other countries don't have, and these safeguards are still strong. First safeguard, decentralized federal election system. We know that the constitutional authority, Article 1, Section 4, gives states and Congress, not the executive branch, the power and the authority to determine how elections are run, federal elections are run. So that decentralized nature makes it very, very hard for any single actor, or certainly the executive branch, to influence elections or to seize control of elections. The courts and Congress and states have checked these efforts at every turn. And that is because it's the Constitution. And that's a crucial safeguard that we still have. Resilience of election officials is another key one I would highlight. We've seen remarkable resilience despite those harassments and threats by election officials, and we have the utmost respect for their work. Independent courts, as I mentioned, there's been ruling after ruling that have ruled against a lot of the false narratives brought to the courts. Even efforts like the Department of Justice to grab state private voter data from states have also been pushed back by courts. The Department of Justice sued 29 states and Washington, D.C. to get the private voters list data from states. And out of those so far, the record for the Department of Justice is 0 for 16 in those lawsuits. Just today, Kentucky ruled. So that is being pushed back by courts, and we still have strong courts. We may not always agree with the Supreme Court, but courts at every level are holding firm. I would also say, there are occasionally some strong leaders, including Republican leaders, who are willing to push back when boundaries are overstepped. And we've been seeing that in Congress, but also at the state levels, in many brave efforts to push back. Civil society is strong. I'll tell you, it's one of the most robust civil society in the world that I've in all the countries I've worked in. We have one of, if not the most active, robust civil society, and right now is a testament to it with all of you. Our independent media is still hanging in there. And of course, the most important thing is voters. Americans, we know from public opinion research, this stuff is not working, that Americans support lawful outcomes for elections. They still support this. We know that bipartisan majorities say ballots should be counted fairly and respectfully and reject political violence. So the voters are the most important piece of all this, and we know voters are still ready to go out and vote and be part of the process. So I'll stop there and look forward to hearing more about the specifics of Florida, and then circling back later to talk about what we can all do to hold these guardrails firm. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. And now for the Florida specific focus, Amy Keith from Common Cause Florida. Amy.
Thank you. I'm going to get my slides up. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Michael, for that overview. My name is Amy Keith. I'm the Executive Director for Common Cause Florida. I also lead the Florida Election Protection Coalition. And as it happens, I also spent 20 years working overseas. I worked running coalitions of local and international nonprofits for human rights, refugee rights, and disaster response. So I really want to second what Michael said. Because I would say after 20 years of working in coalitions in over a dozen different countries, I will say that the coalition working here in Florida to protect election on voting rights is one of the strongest coalitions I have ever had the privilege to work with. It is well over 45 organizations who are working together, planning for all the threats that Michael mentioned. At the end of my presentation, you will see how you can actually plug into this work and to these efforts. It is an incredible group of organizations who are really working not competitively, but cooperatively to really ensure that our democracy stands. Now, um, another thing that I've learned in my many years doing disaster response overseas is you'll often hear like, who helps us, right? We help us. Just so to bring it back also to the voters, the voters, people love to, especially talking about gerrymandering and things like that. People talk about red voters and blue voters. They talk, but we're not little colored bubbles on a map. We are human beings with friends, family, neighbors, our own opinions who can vote however we want to when we go into that voting booth. And it is us who not only helps us when a hurricane hits Florida, to like, but it's also us who helps us when we are facing challenges in making our voices heard at the ballot box. So that is a lot of what I want to cover today is talking to you about really practical things that you can do to mitigate concerns you may be having about casting your own ballot and to help your friends, your family, and your neighbors mitigate and manage any issues that they may be having as well. So, before I go much further, I do have to say, in case you haven't heard about Common Cause has been in Florida since 1973. We helped pass the Sunshine Law, so we love that. Common Cause works on voting and fair representation, anti-corruption and accountability, media technology, civil rights and civil liberties, all the things that make democracy work. But right now, all I am doing is election protection. We are full in to help make sure that this election goes as smoothly as possible. So, top lines for voting in 2026 in Florida. And if you want to take a screenshot of this slide, please take a screenshot of this slide because there's just a couple things that you need to remember. And I'm going to throw a lot of information out there for you. So please feel free to take screenshots of anything. We also have everything at keepfloridavoting.org. So first up, vote early, either by mail or in person. Do not wait till election day. Don't let the people you love wait till election day. Number two, everybody, and I mean everybody, should be double checking their voter status. I'll tell you more about why, but everybody should be doing it. Yes, the voter registration deadline is gone for the primary, but it's still in time for the general. Number three, all vote by mail requests expired in December 2024. So people need to submit a new vote by mail request. That is one of the most suppressive little laws sneaking in Florida a couple of years ago. And perhaps most importantly of everything on this slide, our elections in Florida in 2026 look exactly like our elections in Florida in 2024. That means our elections continue to be well run and secure in the state of Florida. It is not an accident that both Republicans and Democrats refer to Florida as a gold standard. It was easier to vote in Florida during the pandemic than most states in this country. Florida has excellent administration and excellent voting systems. Our problem is we currently have a government that's moving that backwards. But even with that, it is easier to vote in Florida than in so many states in this country. So you should feel confident voting in the state of Florida. We're going to talk about how you can mitigate some of the challenges and some of that backsliding we're seeing. But overall, we have some of the best and most well-run secure elections in the United States. Okay, some other things. There are no changes to the identification you need to vote. So much news about the SAVE Act and the Florida SAVE Act and all that stuff. Is it a problem? Yes, it's a problem in Florida, but it's a problem next year. So we're going to think about what we need for this year. And this year, 0 changes to voting ID, no changes to voting in person. We haven't had changes to the process for voting in person in Florida in 10 years. It looks exactly like it did 10 years ago. Vote by mail. There have been no changes in vote by mail in Florida this year at all. And of course, we have had redistricting, which can create confusion, but a best practice is you should always double check your voting location if you're voting on election day, because the fact is that precincts change and voting locations change even when we don't have redistricting, because sometimes the library had a flood and now you have to vote at a different location. So it's important to always double check your polling location, but more importantly, it is important to not vote on election day. We want to be voting early. Then you don't even have to worry about that. I'm putting up this slide if you would like to take a screenshot of it. This is our key voting dates here in Florida. The voter registration deadline did just pass for the primary. That was July 20th. So the next most important date is August 18th. That is election day. You have to have voted by then or gotten your vote by mail ballot back by then, or it doesn't count. Couple other dates in there about the vote by mail request deadline of August 6th and early voting, which is in all counties on the 8th to 15th. I think there's like 2 counties starting on August 3rd, but generally you're going to see it 8th to 15th. Larger counties will go all the way to the 16th. A really important thing. This is a huge piece of misinformation when it comes to primaries in Florida because we have closed primaries. So we have a third of Florida voters are no party affiliation, and they think they can't vote in this primary, but they can. And they can vote on school boards and county commissions, and they can vote on ballot measures that are local to their county or city. It is so, so, so important that no party affiliation voters know that they can vote in August because they can make the difference when it comes to these local elections. So even though we are a closed primary state, it is misinformation. It is not correct that if you're not with a party, you can't vote in August. So please make sure your folks who have chosen not to affiliate with a party know they can vote. General election deadlines are there for your reference as we come up on November. The one I want to highlight right now is going to be that October 5th because everybody should be checking their status before the voter registration deadline. Now, there's a reason for this. One of the ways as we attack election administration systems across this country has been by trying to what they call clean the voter rolls. There's a process called list maintenance, and list maintenance has become very, very aggressive in Florida to the point where some people would consider it to be a voter purge because it's a lot easier to get kicked off the voter rolls in Florida than it used to be. So it could be, even if you missed a piece of mail, if you moved recently, you could be in a status where you might be off the rolls. We also know that we're seeing people who they check and they think you're not eligible. They think you're out of state. You may have been made inactive. You may have been removed. Just going to say, double check your status. Make sure your address, your information is all up to date. Because even if it is, you're just going to make sure election is smoother for you in general. But you don't know if it could have happened to you. So please just make sure you check your voter status, you make sure you're registered, and you make sure your information's up to date. What's also important here is that the way that they do these statuses in Florida is that you look up your registration, it might say inactive. A lot of people think if they're inactive, they can't vote. That's not true. You can vote if you are inactive. In fact, if you vote, you will then become active. So that's great. So when we look at our voter registration statistics in Florida, they're always showing you active voters, but there are tons of inactive voters in this state who are eligible, and they are the easiest voters to reactivate. They don't have to re-register. They just got to show up and vote. So check your registration status with not just you, but your family, your friends. It's easy to do. Next up, vote early, by mail or in person. This is actually more important this year than ever, and that is both for like a practical reason and for a perception reason. So early voting, of course, provides you with time to both avoid and fix problems, but here's why that's so important this year. First, I want to talk about voting by mail. One of the biggest problems we have in Florida are issues with ID at the polls. We have students who get turned away and not allowed to use a student ID. We get people who told they can't change their address at the polls. We have people who don't have the correct ID because they don't have all the documents they need to get a real ID here in the state of Florida. It is hard for many people to get the ID that they need. Voting by mail uses signature match. So if you are struggling with ID, voting by mail helps you get around that suppression of the voter ID process. Voting by mail, you avoid long lines, you avoid bad weather, which we have lots of during voting season. It helps you avoid any questions about your precinct or your district. And really importantly this year, we're hearing more about things like, political violence. We're hearing more about aggressive actors at the polls. We're hearing about ICE being at the polls. We're hearing about law enforcement at the polls. There's a lot of scary stuff that people are putting out there about what might happen at the polls. And most of that is not going to happen. But the fact is, if somebody is worried about that, they have an amazing solution in Florida. If somebody's in a mixed status family and they really don't want to go to a public building right now, they have a solution in Florida because anyone can vote in Florida by mail without an excuse. And that is a wonderful, wonderful process. It is easy to do. You can request your vote by mail ballot by phone to the supervisor of elections. It's easy. It is safe. It is secure. And it will help people avoid so many of the issues that they are scared about this year. Now, the second option is early in-person voting. So early in-person voting, that's kind of great in Florida because you don't have to worry about anything about what polling location you go to, because you can go to any early voting location in your county, and that's awesome. It's on weekends. In many of the largest counties, you'll have 2 Saturdays and 2 Sundays. And you have the flexibility to go where you feel comfortable. So if you go someplace and you're like, I just don't like the vibe at this polling place, I don't like the support they're giving me, you could just go to a different one. If there's a long line, you can go to a different early voting location. So it really gives you that choice, both in the time and the day that you vote, as well as the location. Plus, so easy at early voting if you recently moved, if you're not sure about your district, it just makes everything a lot easier. Now, of course, we know with vote by mail, there's been a lot of stuff this year where people get really nervous about whether or not it's going to count. So here's just some facts about what it is. The number one reason why vote by mail ballots don't get counted, it's not the U.S. Postal Service. It's not anything nefarious. It is that it got back late. In Florida, your vote by mail ballot has to get back by 7 p.m. That is the number one reason why ballots are rejected in Florida. You need to give it 2 weeks to get back there in time, or you can go drop it off in any drop box. And then on election day, you do have to bring it to the supervisor of elections. You would be surprised how many calls we get to the election protection hotline about people who want to bring their vote by mail ballot to their regular polling place on election day, and they can't. Like, they'd have to exchange it and then they can vote in person instead, but that means they have to wait in line and refill out their ballot. So there's a lot going on. For those, the number two reason vote by mail ballots are rejected in Florida, people forgot to sign the envelope. It's not the mismatched signature, it's just no signature at all. Those are really easy ways to protect it. Also, Florida is an easy state to protect your own vote by mail ballot because you can track it. You can track it from the moment they put it in the mail to you. You can see when it's going to arrive. You can fill it out. You send it back, you track it, you see if they got it, you see if they counted it. So, you know what? If you're worried about USPS, either bring it to a Dropbox or just make sure you mail it 2 weeks in advance and track your ballot. And you know what? If it didn't get there, you can go vote in person instead. We have so many backup plans in the state of Florida. It's wild. Okay, in-person voting. I'm not going to go too much into this because we already talked about early voting. But what I want to draw your attention to is what I wrote next to Election Day. Election Day is just your last chance to vote. And we really need to start talking about it like that. Right? Election day is the last day of voting. We don't want people waiting till election day. That's how we get lines. That's how we get, problems. And if you're waiting till election day to fix a problem, then you're in trouble because you only have till 7 p.m. So election day, last chance to vote. A quick stop on the path to getting the assistance you need. A lot of assistance is available to voters in the state of Florida and actually across the United States. And a lot of people don't know this, right? So any voter who doesn't speak or read English, anybody with a disability, they have a right to receive assistance from anyone they want, as long as it's not their employer or their union representative. That person doesn't have to be a registered voter. They don't have to be an adult. You can bring your kid with you if you want to be your translator. You can bring a friend. And this is so important right now when we do have neighbors who are afraid to leave their homes or afraid to go to public buildings. You can be that neighbor who helps somebody with their ballot. I help my neighbor who's blind. You can be that person who helps somebody get their voice heard. A couple other things. Every single county in Florida is required to provide Spanish language ballots. Every single county in Florida is required to provide accessible vote by mail. And most Florida counties are also required to provide everything in Spanish, and Miami has to provide everything in Haitian Creole as well. And if all that fails, supervisors of elections, their staff are so helpful. Save your supervisor of elections phone number in your phone. Call them if you have a question or a problem. Our election workers in Florida are by and large amazing people, dedicated civil servants who want to help you. And in the off chance you get a bad apple there, call us at the 866-OUR-VOTE hotline and we can help you. Those are all our hotlines. Pause so you can take a screenshot. We've got English, we've got Spanish, we've got a dozen Asian languages, we've got Arabic, we have a Haitian Creole hotline that Common Cause runs here in Florida, we've got Disability Rights Hotline, and we have the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition hotline for people with prior felony convictions. Okay, I think this is almost my last slide, but I'm going to just say don't leave without voting. This is the message I would like everybody to internalize. Don't leave without voting this year because we do know that some folks do end up with challenges at the polls. So please be that person who helps other people advocate for themselves, especially young people in your lives. It's so important that young people have a positive first voting experience. So please be that voice to help people know don't leave without voting. If you're in line by 7 p.m., you have a right to vote. You can change your address at the polls, friends and neighbors. There's no deadline to change your address. You can change your address at the polls. Don't let anybody tell you you can't. If you're an eligible Florida voter and you're in the correct polling location for your current residence, you have a right to a provisional ballot. Don't let anybody tell you you have to leave without voting, especially on election day. Demand a provisional ballot. Do not take no for the answer. If you are denied the ballot for any reason, if someone you know is denied the ballot for any reason, ask to talk to the clerk. Since the pandemic, there are so many new poll workers. Do you know how poll workers have to go through like a whole day of training? They are learning a million pieces of code and laws. Guess what? They're humans. They might not have memorized all that if this is their first year being a poll worker. They might be doing their best and just have made a mistake, just have misunderstood something. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt. And let's make sure that you ask to talk to the clerk because the clerk is the most senior person. That is the expert in the location. So if you are denied the ballot for any reason, maybe just think, okay, maybe I got a newbie here. Ask to talk to the clerk and make sure that you're able to cast your ballot. And of course, call us at Election Protection if you can't. I think I'm way over time. So quick stop on mis and disinformation. Fear, distrust, confusion are deliberate voter suppression strategies aimed at silencing our voices before we get to the polls. Don't be part of it. Do not argue with the bots. Do not spread misinformation. Go directly to your supervisor of elections office. The QR code is on there on the screen. Go to organizations you know and trust. Like I'm just gonna shout out perhaps Issue One or Common Cause or the League of Women Voters. Go to organizations you trust, not a search result. Do not get your election information from ChatGPT. If you have friends and neighbors who are trying to get their election information from Claude or ChatGPT or Reddit or social, just please tell them to stop. It's insane. Like do not let people do AI for their voting information. I'll do this. I'll just going to pause on this last slide. If you want to get involved, you can get involved. Linktree, Help Florida Voters. You can sign up to be a poll monitor, a canvassing board monitor. If you do that, you'll be the first line of defense on the ground for the election, and we will plug you in to any efforts after the election to help for all that mobilization in case there's any shenanigans like Michael talked about. You will also be on the list to help be out there mobilizing in the streets. So you can do double duty. You can help protect the election, first line of defense while voting is ongoing, and you can be ready to be out there to defend our elections if anything goes wrong. So please join us. And I'm so sorry I took so long, friends. I'm going to stop now.
Lanelle, do you want to add any commentary to what you've heard here in the perspective of the League of Women Voters?
I do. I have a brief statement, but I just want to say, Amy, I realize you were trying to get through all of that, and that was like on speed, so to speak. But that was really you took like so much information and you put it into such a short amount of time, and that was really an investment in our fellow voters. So I hope people were able to do the screenshots. If not, I know we're going to be able to make this information available to everyone afterwards. So that was just fabulous. I just want to say good evening to everyone. I just want to thank Issue One, the Floridians for Democracy Institute, and Common Cause for allowing the League of Women Voters of Florida to join you this evening. This is a very timely, but it's very necessary discussion and information that we're receiving. And for those of you who are not familiar with the League of Women Voters, we are a nonpartisan political organization. We're a grassroots organization, and we work to protect and expand voting rights. Tough thing to do in today's world. Some people are trying to limit it. We're trying to expand voting rights. And that's for everyone, not one political party or the other, not one demographic or the other, but for everyone who is eligible to participate in voting here in the United States. So we empower voters and we defend democracy through advocacy, education, and litigation. And we do that as far as the League of Women Voters of Florida goes. We do that at the local and the state level. So I'm just going to be really frank about the moment that we find ourselves in. So Michael's assessment this evening actually warns us of the dangers of the moment, that not is just about the 2026 election, but whether or not these new habits in election manipulation become embedded in the system for years to come. And it notes the pressure that it's not coming from these foreign entities. It's not coming from isolated actors. It's unfortunately coming from our own federal executive branch of government. So the League of Women Voters, we take this very seriously. And we're not responding with fear. We're responding with action, pretty much like all of you on the screen this evening. So his assessment this evening highlights several areas where the nation's election immune system is showing stress, so to speak. It notes that our election officials, these are our frontline leaders for elections. They're under heavy pressure, facing intimidation, investigations, and even threats to themselves and to their family members. It reminds us that civil society groups like ours and the ones you see on your screen, we're increasing our activity, but we're also under growing pressure. And it warns us that the information in the ecosystem is in critical condition. It's flooded with falsehoods, as you heard Amy mention, outrage, AI-generated disinformation, and it's all designed to do one thing, really denigrate our trust in our election process and our election officials' right to question whether or not our vote will even matter. But even amid all of these challenges, his assessment confirms one thing, that you, the voter, remain one of the strongest stabilizing forces that we have. So this is actually where our work begins, and it's where Florida's role becomes very essential. So Florida's decentralized election structure, we have 67 independent supervisors of elections, and they remain one of our greatest strengths, right? They're holding the line. Michael's assessment reminds us that no president can simply order nationwide changes, and that a decentralized administration is one of the most durable defenses that we have against manipulation. So we see this here in Florida every day. Our supervisors of elections continue to run secure, transparent, and professional elections despite national pressure and misinformation. But resilience isn't automatic, right? It requires vigilance, education, and legal action when necessary. So Michael's assessment emphasizes that courts remain a vital guardrail even as they operate under this mounting strain of pressure, right? So the League of Women Voters, we're reinforcing that guardrail, and we do that through strategic litigation. So as far as the vote by mail restrictions, we've challenged provisions that make it harder for voters, especially seniors, students, persons with disabilities, and working families, to maintain a consistent access to vote by mail ballots. These laws, they've shortened the windows. They've imposed new ID requirements, and they really create an unnecessary burden, not just for the voter, but for our supervisors of elections, right? There's also the third-party voter registration organization restrictions and oppression that we've seen. So we've been litigating against laws that impose fines and criminal penalties and extreme administrative requirements on organizations just like the League of Women Voters. These laws, they threaten the ability of nonpartisan groups to register voters, especially in communities that have historically been underrepresented in the electorate. You need to look no further than the Florida Division of Elections website to see that the number of third-party voter registration organizations went from well over 1,000 to less than 200 after they passed legislation increasing fines and fees here in Florida. But also, we've been litigating and pushing back against the voter list maintenance and the data sharing practices. So we're challenging state policies that risk improper voter purges and the sharing of voter-sensitive information. And the assessment noted that similar federal demands for voter data pose a risk that actually threatens our actual right to vote. And actually, the League of Women Voters, we agree with that. And we're fighting to ensure Florida voters are not swept into flawed or politically motivated data processes or operations. So know this, that these things are not abstract. These are the legal backbones of our mission, which is empowering voters and defending democracy. And as you heard Amy talk about, supporting our supervisors of elections, right? We need to protect the supervisors of elections, but we also need to protect the process. And now there's no more important time, right? So as Amy said, we hope that those of you participating tonight, that you'll consider becoming a poll worker, doing poll monitoring, nonpartisan election observer work through Common Cause. The League works with Common Cause. You do an absolute fantastic job here in the state of Florida. Amy, we appreciate you and your staff so much. And also consider using the League's nonpartisan online voter guide, vote411.org, so that you can cast an informed vote, right? So we have that. But we really want voters to vote, and we want you to encourage others to vote. So participation is actually the strongest antidote that we have to the backsliding that's taking place in our democracy. So I'll leave it at that and wait for closing comments. But this has just been such an informative panel, and I appreciate everyone who's contributed to it.
Thank you all. I just want to reinforce a couple things that our speakers have said before we take questions for the remaining 15 minutes. For those of you who haven't voted by mail, it is an incredibly simple process. Here's my mail ballot. They send it to you at your home address. You just hit a simple envelope, you take out the materials. There's a ballot, just like the ballot you would see in a polling place. You fill it out. They give you a return envelope that's stamped, postage free. As Amy said, it is very, very important when you fill out your ballot and put it in the envelope that you seal your ballot, and then you fill out the form on the back. It tells you your voter certificate that you have to fill out. You want to give them your email address or phone number or way to contact you. In case there's any problem with your ballot, they will call you and give you an opportunity to fix it. And then you need to sign it at the bottom. Then you drop it in the mailbox. And in Florida, my experience, I voted here for 26 years since the 2000 election. Every eligible voter can vote. You will face no problem in 99.99% of the cases voting at the polls or by mail. All votes will be counted and results will be tallied fairly and reported accurately. The threats are out there. They've been out there since 2000 when partisans have tried to take over the electoral process. But groups like Common Cause and the League of Women Voters and now Issue One have overcome them. And the results are that in Florida, your votes will matter and that there is no impediments. We'll be glad to take your questions or comments now. And Bill Petrarca is going to take over to let us know what questions you have. Please either email Jim or Bill or put them in the chat if it's now working. We do have one question already that I've seen. And this is a Lee County specific question. The person says, I've heard a lot of concern about the former family partisanship of our recently appointed supervisor of elections. I have some comments on that, but I'll let somebody else go first.
I'm happy to talk about that, Bob. So I think it's fair to say that Common Cause does not frequently agree with or has not frequently agreed with Jenna Persons-Mullica while she has been serving in the Florida legislature. Unfortunately, she was a sponsor of HB 991, which is the bill that is going to change our voter ID laws. She has also sponsored other election bills that Common Cause and the League vehemently opposed. It's a view of elections that she's taken, which is more restrictive than it is inclusive. About keeping people out than ensuring every citizen can vote. I think it's a different view on elections. And I think, though, the laws in Florida are the laws in Florida, right? The procedures in Florida are the procedures in Florida. I do not think she is a supervisor who is going to break the law. And I think that's important. And that's why it's so important for us to educate voters so that if they have concerns about something like that, they're aware of what their rights are. Knowing your rights so that you can assert your rights. So do we agree with this particular supervisor on the direction that we think Florida elections should be going? No. But the important thing to remember is that we have strong electional laws, policies, and procedures in place in the state of Florida. It's also important to remember that the poll workers at your local precinct in Lee County, they're not changing, right? You've got the same folks who are running that office and running and have been serving you and helping you and your friends and family vote for all these years. So I don't want to stay in a place and say that we don't have concerns, but I just want to say that it's easy for concerns to get, blown out of proportion. And the other thing is that our supervisors of elections are elected positions, which means that the people can also hold supervisors of elections accountable for how they run our elections as well. So I hope that helps to alleviate some of your concerns about that. But again, knowing your rights is one of the best way that you can help personally alleviate your own concerns about any situations like that.
Anybody else comment on that? Well, I happen to live in Lee County, and I have the same concerns. And people who don't know, Jenna Persons-Mullica, former state representative, husband's a county commissioner, father's a school committeeman there, quite partisan people. He was a very partisan member of the state legislature. All that is true. And it is also true that so far, since she's been appointed, there is not one iota of evidence that she has done anything illegal or inappropriate. My mail ballot arrived in the same way, in the same form. The website of the supervisor has not changed. Yes, there's a potential. No, it has not materialized. There is, it is the same as it has always been. When there was previously a Republican supervisor, you can vote. Your vote will be counted, will be tallied fairly. Bill or Jim, do we have additional questions?
So unless Bill receives some, I'm hoping now that people will raise their Zoom hand and jump in and participate. I know you have questions, although the panel did such a phenomenal job. Maybe they alleviated a lot of your concerns, but this you can't follow, as most of you that participate in our programs do. You follow all this stuff very closely, and as you follow it, it's easy to get massively depressed and very concerned. And as Amy pointed out, there's a lot to be concerned about after 2026. So the midterms play a big role in this. And so raise your Zoom hands and participate. Let's get into this.
I also just want to put out there that I love wonky voting questions. I consider it a personal challenge to ensure that I can answer any question that comes to me from any voter. So help me practice, folks. We're about to get all our calls for like 2 elections. So throw it at me if you can. Try to stump me. I love that. Help me learn.
Hey, just from so now not league hat, but a precinct manager's hat. I worked during early voting, also manage a decent sized precinct here in Duval County on election day. So some of the things that Amy said ring very true for the training that we get. I don't have the ability to tell you no that you can't cast a vote. So regardless of what's going on, somebody's going to leave with one of those tickets that says that you cast a provisional ballot. And then the canvassing board will be the deciding factor on that in your particular county. But also, please know this. Most of us are just so excited to see people come in and vote. We've signed up for that. We know it's going to be a long day on election day, but we're excited to see every voter that comes in the precinct. And we want you to leave with having a good experience. So we want everyone to be able to participate in their democracy and be represented at the polls. So please know that. That's the experience of most of us who work the polls.
Hey, Bill, can you go off of focus mode so that we can see if hands are going up?
Yeah.
Patty Duncan had her hand raised.
Great. Patty, you're up. And I know that Adrian has some questions and comments. He'd like some stuff put in the chat. So feel free now, if we're off of focus mode, raise your Zoom hand and you'll go right to the front.
They don't know how to do that. Just raise their hand.
But Patty, why don't you jump in here?
Thank you, Jim. I just wanted to say, yes, I think Jenna Person Milica is trying to be a very well, but what bothered me was she was in some of the or at least one of the retirement homes, telling elderly people how they can vote. With her family influence, with her family in so many positions of power in Lee County, I thought this was a very bad example of her going in, and it may have been totally innocent, but for her to be influencing elderly people who may not understand, I felt this was a very poor action on her part. And I would like other people's opinion on this, because it really struck me when I saw that she was in these elderly homes telling these people how they can vote. It seems innocent, but with her political family, it felt conflicted to me.
Patty, if I may, So it is the function of the supervisors of elections throughout the entire state of Florida to go into elderly facilities, residential homes, assisted living facilities, and offer what's known here in Duval County as supervised voting, which is basically vote by mail, but the ballots are taken back by election workers. But to really facilitate the opportunity for those folks to be able to cast a vote and not be left out. So I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, or there may be of something else that concerns you, but that is a function of the supervisor of elections, is to try to, give access to voters regardless of where their situation is.
And thank you. I appreciate that. And I thought this is probably, something, it's just that with her background, but since she's the supervisor of elections, that's her role. So it just bothers me because of her many tentacles and how she could influence elderly people.
Well, I think a lot of people will be watching, and hopefully she will moderate as best she can to serve as her predecessor did. Chris, you have your hand up, and then I know Victoria had a question she'd like to ask also. Chris?
I'm sorry to go on the same topic, but I had very much concerns about Jenna as well. When I heard she was appointed to take Tommy's place, I always felt, like he was a good, honest, as far as the election portion, not going off onto another tangent, but she is not my representative. I'm just a little bit south of there, so I have Adam Batana. But anyway, I went to city council meetings. I'm not in the city limits, but I went to support people who were going to speak when they had that emergency council because of the tie vote on whether to adopt the 287G agreement. Well, in that meeting, when they were having the second meeting to break the tie, she was brought in and was allowed to give a speech before the city council meeting. And it was very terrible because she basically denigrated immigrants and said that, about criminality and everything. And I just was so shocked at that I would be afraid, and I'm sure she was told from on high in Tallahassee to go to that meeting and do that. And I just feel like she would very much follow somebody's, and so as long as people are watching, like and you guys all feel comfortable, then I'll feel comfortable too, because I just feel like if she was told to do something that was untoward, that she would do it. So
I just I want to pop in because I do think that I think this is real. Like, and I think that people and I want to acknowledge that this is real on both sides of the coin too, right? Like you have Republicans who are under a Democratic supervisor of elections who are concerned. You have Democrats who are under a Republican supervisor of elections. It's a little bit of a challenge because in Florida we do have supervisors of elections who are partisan and are elected. Now that's the system that we have. Now I'll note that we have had that system for a very long time, and our elections are still fair. Most of our elected officials do rise to the challenge. Now, we have had scenarios where there have been problems, and even in those scenarios, the staff of those offices are so professional that we have even been able to address problems. So I guess for me, it's and thinking about what Michael was saying at the top of the call, right? There's a lot of stuff out there which can cause us concern. Everything from what you're seeing, what you see is maybe you're concerned about how good an actor your local election official is, or perhaps it's further up the chain. But when you're looking at this stuff, I think it makes a sense. I think it makes a lot of sense right now to take a deep breath and remember that fear and that concern is also being drummed up in us, right? There is a lot of stuff out there in the universe, and AI is making it worse. It's swirling to make us worried and scared, whereas this behavior is not new. I mean, voter suppression has been going on for like 300 years. Like that is the history of the United States, my friends. So this stuff is not necessarily new. Partisan actors are not new. We actually have more structures to respond to that, to see it, and to work through it than we have ever before. We have more eyes on the ground. And I'll tell you that having dealt with, I'm going to give an example. In 2024, we actually had a political appointee who was the supervisor of elections in Orange County. There was real problems with both experience level, and we don't know if it was politicized, but we had problems. But the fact of the matter is we were also able to work with the staff in that office. We were able to address problems. We were able to make sure that people had their voice heard. And I guess that's the point I want to get into. We've got two sides of the coin. One, don't fall for all the fear that's being drummed up. Know that this is stuff that is out there. And number two, if you are concerned, there's a lot that you can do. A lot of those tactics I gave you to make sure that you are able to exercise your right and help others do it as well. So I think we just want you and your community to go in with confidence to this election and not go in with fear, if that makes sense.
And
to
as
be
Amy
part of building
noted in
confidence.
the chat, if you see something that or hear something that is inappropriate, report it, document it, talk to the election protection people, and they will deal with it. Rumors travel fast.
It's true.
Facts need to catch up.
I don't want to tell people not to be concerned. We work with an incredibly diverse coalition. We have many mixed families in our coalition who are extremely concerned about what's going to happen when they go vote. We have more 287G agreements in the state of Florida than anywhere else in the country, which means that local law enforcement can be immigration enforcement. There is a lot of reasons to really be concerned. But on the other side of that coin is that there is a lot that we can actually, I don't want to tell people don't be afraid, but also, as Bob mentioned, in most cases, that's not going to happen to you. And that fear is being put in front of us as a strategy so that people don't vote. Never forget that. Voting is resistance. Voting is an act of community care. Okay, voting is not just a way you make your voice heard. Voting is actually, maybe it takes a little bit more bravery if you're really worried about something this year, but that's okay. So you can actually take, instead of being afraid or instead of spreading that, like turn your fear into action, and be out there at the polls watching to make sure that it's all going all right. There's a lot you can do to turn that fear into action and help us be able to stop any shenanigans, and also to help spread that confidence that in most cases there aren't shenanigans.
Well, Amy, you and shenanigans, those words keep.
Yeah, that's like my favorite word tonight. I don't know. It's really
Yeah.
fun to say. Everybody say, you can
Yeah.
all say it with me, shenanigans.
Well, speaking of shenanigans, Victoria asked a question that's sort of along these lines, and she's right here to pop in. Victoria?
Hi. Amy, I want to be you when I grow up. You're very inspiring. What I asked was that my husband and I always vote early, and I'm very confident in my ability to overcome any blockades to me voting. But I would love a sort of a step-by-step guide to tactfulness on site if you see problems. I am the kind of person who likes to step into a situation and try and correct it, but I don't want to make it worse. You know, growing up for me, I've been voting for more than 5 decades. Once you were at your polling site and addressing your ballot, that's a sacrosanct space. So how do you handle it if you see someone being denied what appears to be their right to vote? Should I not engage on site and just call the toll-free number and report it? Should I attempt to film it with my phone? So that's my question.
Victoria, that may be my favorite question I've ever gotten. First of all, one thing you can do is if you want to get an edge on this, you can get trained as a poll monitor, because we go over all of this in the poll monitor training. But say you're just a normal person and you're out there at your polling place. A couple of things you can do. First, you know how to overcome barriers, right? So if you see that person leaving their polling place, if you see someone walking out of a polling place and they look frustrated, they look angry, right? Check in with them and be like, did everything go okay? Because you can be the person who encourages them to self-advocate, right? That's a lot of what our poll monitors do when they're out there, is they're encouraging them to go and being like, no, you really do have a right. You can use the tools I just gave you. Help somebody look themselves up to find their own registration records. You can help them look them up on your phone. Help them look themselves up. And if they're registered, then help them go talk to the clerk, right? Be the person who helps them. I think you can do that. Don't film, because it's illegal to film inside a polling place. So please don't do that. Other things we want to think about is a lot of the work we think about with de-escalation and some of those tactics are really tricky at the polls, because the most important thing at the polls is to keep things calm. Our goal is to always reduce tension, because if you increase tension at the polls, fewer people vote. You're creating an environment. So you always want to bring tension down. You never want to blow things up. That is not the place to hold people accountable. You hold people accountable by voting at the polls, not by blowing things up, right? So what I would say is be with the voter, call us at election protection, or even better, call the supervisor of elections office and be with them to talk it through. And if that doesn't work, you have election protection. So I would say talk to that person, be a friendly neighbor, use your knowledge and skills to help that person self-advocate. I hope that helps. Like, if there's violent people at the polls, please don't engage with them. Please call us at election protection and let us know. We have a lot of different tactics to help deal with that. And so we would ask you to call us if you're seeing anything which is more aggressive or violent rather than engage. But I hope that helps, Victoria. Maybe it's not the sexiest answer, but it's real.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. And I would love to be trained as a monitor. So thank you.
Hey, Amy, when do they call the 866 our vote number?
Oh, you can call that whenever you want. If you've got a question about voting, if you see kind of voter suppression, if something doesn't seem right to you, just call it, just report it. There's a whole bunch of lawyers just waiting to take your call. I have already had 3 tickets escalated to me this week. They pop right into my inbox if they need a response right here on the ground in Florida. So it is active. You call if you see something that you're not sure about, if you have a question.
It's 866.
Go ahead. Want to repeat the number?
It's in the chat. Amy put it in the chat, but it's 866 our vote.
And in the chat are also links to very good election protection guides produced by Common Cause and Issue 1. So check them out and use that information to empower yourself, your friends, and your neighbors and your family.
Also, in the slides from my presentation, which will be shared after this, I believe, there's that one slide that has all the hotlines in all the different languages.
Great, thank you. I did have a question submitted in the chat. An individual participating tonight asked if I would ask it. It says, our vote by mail in Hillsborough County includes a, quote, privacy envelope, which then goes into the return by mail envelope. Is this part of all mail policies in Florida? I'm assuming that, I don't know.
Well, the secrecy sleeve, there it is.
Yeah, but if you don't use it, your vote will still be counted.
Yes, that's right.
There's other states where they don't count it, but in Florida, if you forget the secrecy sleeve, you're all good.
And part of what they want you to do, and you're right, Amy, you don't have to, is put your ballot in the secrecy sleeve, and then you insert it into the envelope and sign it and mail it back. And it's a very secure, simple system and free.
It's a little different in every county.
Yeah.
Okay, so it looks different, but all the counties use it?
Yeah, they do all use it, but again, it's not required. So don't panic if you forgot.
It's designed so that when the supervisor's office, they take out your ballot, they don't see your ballot. My ballot is inside this secrecy sleeve.
Go ahead.
Great. So how do you vote early and often?
It looks like Patty has another question.
Much better. Patty's got a better question.
No, it's not a question. When you're talking about putting your mail-in vote, you have to put it in that secure sleeve or what?
You don't have to. They want
you don't.
It's better because then your vote is secret. You want your ballot to be secret, so that's why it's there. But what I'm just telling you is that if you forget, your ballot will still be counted in the state.
Oh, thank you, because
this still works, but it's not optimal.
But if you put 2 vote by mail-ins in one envelope, neither get counted.
Right.
So don't try to save on the stamp.
It's because the outside of the envelope has the voter's name on it.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Anybody else have some questions for this phenomenal panel before we go to a great surprise closing announcement on my behalf? But
Robin has a question.
Well, I have a quick question. Does Florida, when we lived in Minnesota, we had election judges. Does Florida have election judges? And when we were in Minnesota, somebody asked me if I would like to be an election judge, but they had to know if I was Democrat or Republican.
So,
yeah, I don't know about, isn't that funny? I don't know about Florida, but I've been voting here a long time.
yeah, so everything's called very different things in different states, which actually can create a lot of confusion, especially in a state as transient as Florida, where we have lots of people coming in from outside. I'm just going to give you my favorite one, by the way, poll monitor, poll worker, poll watcher.
Okay.
Poll watchers, partisan, inside, poll workers, staff of the supervisor, poll monitors, that's us, nonpartisan, outside. But in some states, the poll monitor, poll watcher thing is flipped. So it is really confusing. In Florida, you may hear other states' election judges, board of elections, all sorts of things. So now in Florida, we have inspectors and clerks who are the staff there at a polling location, right? So the clerk is going to be the person in charge. The inspectors are the folks who, and Lanelle, you keep me honest on this. You can see the folks who are working the election, and then you got the poll deputy at the door. Now, when it comes to like adjudicating our ballots, that is not up to regular citizens. So we have canvassing boards in Florida. Canvassing board is comprised of the supervisor of elections, a county judge, and a representative of the county commission. All right. And so those three individuals are the ones who decide if a vote by mail ballot is going to be counted. If there's a question about signature, they're the ones who adjudicate. They also have really clear protocols about determining voter intent. You can read those protocols. They're public information. If you want to know how they make the decisions about, how to judge if a ballot should be counted or not, it's fascinating. You can even be a canvassing board monitor. Also at that link I sent, if you want to learn more about this process, be a canvassing board monitor and you can watch them adjudicate. I have watched the supervisor in Pinellas argue with the judge in favor of counting that ballot and winning, right? It's a 3-person panel and they will really debate. It's actually incredible to watch that democracy, that important piece of democracy happen. Now, when you talk about partisan and nonpartisan and different parties, at a polling place in Florida, you cannot have all the poll workers be from one party. That's illegal. So it has to be a mix. It does not have to be a mix of Democrats and Republicans, however. It can be NPA and Democrat, or NPA and Republican, or Democrat and Republican, or Libertarian and Democrat. It just cannot all be one party. So if that's something that matters to you, there are counties where they're so red or they're so blue and NPAs may be so disconnected that it's hard for the supervisor to actually find enough poll workers to meet that multi-partisan rule. So please do sign up as a poll worker if you live in one of those counties, because it is so important to be able to have that mix of parties there at the polls.
Interesting. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Jim.
Yeah, so would the panelists like to make some closing remarks? And then I would like to share with you an upcoming event.
Any of our speakers want to say anything further?
I think I've said plenty. I'd love to hear more from Michael, though.
I can close out. I've closed out for myself and then would love others to jump in. This has been really illuminating. I mean, I just learned so much about the details of Florida voting. I'm ready to go down there and register to vote. But this has been super fascinating, and it's also just really encouraging to see how many people are engaged and ready to participate. And I wanted to end by just sort of categorizing a few things of ways to participate. We talked a lot about voting. So the way you'll see in our toolkit that I shared, the way we frame it is like there are things you can do to show up, there are things you can do to speak up, and there are things you can do to stand up. So I think the showing up we talked a lot about tonight, the crucial things, the voting, helping other people vote, helping other people make a plan to vote, helping become a poll worker. But then there's ways to actually speak up, and you can actually, stand with election officials. And we put in our toolkit, and I know Common Cause and others have these things of like, you can write a letter or an email to your local poll worker, your polling officials, and thank them for their work, or show up to a local board of elections meeting and, speak out against somebody spouting disinformation, or just voice your support for your official. And then there are things you can do to stand up, and that really gets down to like contacting your elected officials and telling them, we want you to respect the results of elections. We want, if election's certified, you better respect it. Obviously, if they have challenges, they can bring evidence, but otherwise, commit to fair election practices. So you can do things by contacting your officials to hold them accountable for respecting elections. And then also, like we talked about, monitoring elections. So that's all part of the standing up. So again, just thanks again for having me. And Really come away inspired by all of your questions and all of your interests and activism. So, and Amy, it was great to learn more about the process here in Florida, and look forward to staying in touch with you all.
Lanelle, anything to
I'll
close
just
out?
say this, for our Thursday evening, it was great to see so many people who really invested your time. I hope you saw this as an investment. But then I would ask you to think about this, caring is sharing unless it's misinformation, and then it's not caring. So we ask that you not share. But so the beauty of what happened tonight, you're going to get links. There's going to be a follow-up to this, but don't keep this to yourself. Take this information out, share it on your social media, share it with people that you care about. Share it with people in line at the grocery store. Since we're all spending so much money, at least invest a little time in voting while you're in line. But please take this information out into the world so that other people can find it. Make this investment in your neighbors, in your elections, and in your community. But I appreciate everybody being here this evening. Thank you so much.
Great. Due to technical difficulties at the beginning, I didn't get to give you a phenomenal introduction of Bob Schaefer, but you got to meet Bob again tonight for the multiple time he's helped us and one of our board members. So, Bob, any closing comment on your behalf?
No, I think, there's threats out there. We've overcome them in the past. We'll overcome them again. Your vote will be counted. It will be counted accurately. It will be tabulated, and you will have your absolute influence as a resident and citizen of the United States if you cast your vote. Don't let them block you.
Wonderful. Thanks, everybody. I've got a great announcement to make. I'm going to put a link here in the email for registration, or in the chat.
Robin,
no, there she's clapping.
oh, she's clapping.
Robin is clapping. She's not, doesn't have her hand up. She's clapping.
Okay.
So on August 28th, 1963, over 250,000 people gathered at the Lincoln Memorial to demand civil and economic equality for Black Americans. The historic 1963 March on Washington was one of the largest political rallies for human rights in U.S. history. Not only did it bring people of many races, faiths, generations, and political traditions together, saying enough is enough, it built crucial momentum, helping pave the way for the passage of the Civil Rights Act of '64 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. 63 years later, the work they began is unfinished. The rights of millions of Americans are at risk while key elements of voting rights are being dismantled. Florida and our nation stand at crossroads, politically, spiritually, and morally. The institutions, rights, and norms that generations fought to secure deserve our active defense. Next month, on August 29th, a date strategically chosen as 63 years and 1 day since the anniversary of the March on Washington, Floridians for Democracy and Mount Olive AME Church will host the Rally of Hope. While the prime location will be at the 800-seat Mount Olive AME Church in Fort Myers, it will be live streamed to anyone who registers. People can have their own clubs and organizations and group sessions, or do it in their home, or have discussions about it. But the Rally of Hope is not a protest. It is a revival of hope, solidarity, and shared civic responsibility, uniting people of races, faiths, generations, and political traditions. The gathering is open to all who believe that democracy must be actively defended. Together, we will not surrender hope to cynicism, nor will we respond to this moment with anger, but with action and purpose. Our tagline describes the Rally of Hope quite well: inspiring hope, committing to vote. We hope you'll join us in person or virtually. Leave inspired and committed to vote, and, as we heard again tonight, encourage others to vote. I placed the registration link in the chat, and you'll learn more through our upcoming newsletters and social media. And to close, I share that we support one of the many famous quotes of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The time is always right to do what is right. We hope you will join us a great team of putting hard work into this. We have a letter that we'll be able to present from Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock, who we really wanted to help us take this viral across the nation. He's busy trying to make sure that we keep the Senate going alive, so he's busy with that. But we've got a phenomenal panel of presenters and upbeat jazz music and some special readings, historical readings read by people today, reminding us that there have been people before us that have presented with hope and inspired us to vote. It ties beautifully into tonight's program, and we're just honored to have each of you here with us. You'll be getting a newsletter in a few days that has an action agenda that will explain the recommendations of all of our panelists and what you can do individually and collectively. So with that, anything else for the cause? We're all set. Bob, thank you. Panel, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful job. Excellent. And hopefully in some way, shape, or form, we'll see all of you on August 29th as together we rally for hope. Thank you.